A very good morning and welcome to the first Fintelekt and ABA webinar for 2021. I hope 2021 has started well for all of you. For us at Fintelekt, the year has started with some exciting developments which we will share towards the end of this webinar. Today's topic is prioritizing AML training. AML training, as you all know, is one of the pillars of a good AML framework alongside AML governance, monitoring, and technology. We will be discussing how financial institutions can give training its due importance and ensure that they ultimately create a workforce that is ready and equipped to fight financial crime. On the panel today, we have Sarwar MEQ Chowdhury, independent consultant from Bangladesh, Kevin Gomez, Head AML KYC and MLRO from IDFC First Bank, and Shirish Pathak, Managing Director, Fintelekt Advisory Services. Let's begin with the first presentation for the day from Sarwar. Sarwar is a distinguished banker with 34 years of experience in banking. He has played a significant role in thought leadership in developing internal control and compliance functions for the banking industry in Bangladesh. He started his career with IFIC Bank as probationary officer, and later he worked for American Express Bank, Citibank NE, and Standard Chartered Bank in different important roles. Prior to joining EBL, he was the consultant of Islami Bank Bangladesh Limited. In his long career, he has served as Head of Legal and Compliance of Standard Chartered Bank, Head of Compliance and Human Resources of Citibank NE also. Can we please have Sarwar's presentation?
Okay, good morning and good afternoon to everybody. First of all, thank you to Fintelekt and the Asian Bankers Association for inviting me to speak on effective and relevant AML training across organizations. So banks and financial institutions rely very heavily on their diligent workforces to defend against the money laundering and trace financing risks. And it's not just one function or department of the bank that is involved in AML responsibilities. Every employee within the institution must know his or her respective role and be able to perform it. Therefore, ensuring the institution's employees are adequately trained in anti-money laundering is a crucial component of managing financial crime risks. Now, proper AML training not only needs to be comprehensive, up-to-date, and participatory, it also needs to be performed regularly for every single employee having an AML role, not just customer-facing employees. We are all aware that there have been several regulatory enforcement actions for training deficiencies. Now, who are the target audience for it? Several functions are involved in anti-money laundering program. So while a large portion of population of employees need AML training, the curriculum should be tailor-made to develop the essential skills necessary to perform different roles in the front, middle, and back offices. Now, basic AML awareness training needs to be imparted to all, irrespective of their roles, to understand how to support their institution in anti-money laundering and countering terrorist finance, and how to prevent, detect, and report money laundering activities. However, targeted training for financial crime risk specialists and business and operations staff in front, middle, and back offices on various aspects such as know your customer, the importance of customer due diligence, screening, sanctions and transaction monitoring, and even trade-based money laundering, etc., according to their respective roles. Finally, AML awareness training for the board and top management is also necessary to increase their knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors relating to AML risk management systems and get their buy-in to invest in necessary resources and infrastructure. Now, about the AML training curricula. First of all, basic training should include overview of the key AML laws, regulations, and other requirements of the institutions, like their own policies, AML policies and programs. And as I said earlier, training should be custom tailored to each institution's unique risk profiles. Like certain banks, they are heavily involved in cross-border transactions or trade finance transactions, while there are other domestic banks who are not so much involved in those activities. Therefore, the training levels or different types of trainings need to be imparted. I mean, for cross-border and trade finance, TBML or trade-based money laundering is the current focus, and those kind of trainings need to be given. Then the training programs should also cover day-to-day compliance responsibilities, including how to recognize red flags in transaction activity, what to do once potential suspicious or illegal activity is identified, who is responsible for what within the institutions, what should be recorded, how long those records need to be retained, and the consequences for non-compliance, and potential suspicious activity within a certain period of joining. And everyone who works with customers institution-wide must receive updated AML training at least annually. That is a refresher annually every year. The most important thing is that training programs should be constantly updated to reflect new realities, new challenges, new regulations, and emerging typologies, money laundering typologies. Typically, in our country, typically the training traditional topics for AML training are as follows: AML governance framework for banks, AML CFT responsibilities and accountabilities, risk-based approach, customers KYC, CDD and onboarding procedures, ongoing and periodic KYC, CDD review processes, identification of beneficial owners and ultimate beneficial owner unwrapping processes, politically exposed persons and enhanced due diligence procedures, monitoring and reporting requirements under AML safety regulations, suspicious activity and suspicious transaction identification and reporting procedures, screening and transaction monitoring, and of course, red flags. We are all aware of the Wolfsburg Due Diligence Questionnaire. That happens to be the global standard for performing customer due diligence of correspondent banks, and that has been recently revamped. And the questionnaire, there are over 100 questions. Actually, if you count the sub questions, they run into more than 340 questions. And these are grouped under 10 heads, actually, starting with the questions about the entity, the ownership of the entity, then the AML safety sanctions program, anti-bribery and corruption, institutional policies and procedures, AML safety sanctions risk assessment, KYC, CDD and EDD, payment transparency, sanctions, training and education, and even audit. Now, I've put the education sections here, training and education section, where the question number 98 to 101 requires, asks for certain training related questions. For instance, at 98, question number 98, does the entity provide mandatory training which includes 9A, identification and reporting of transactions to government authorities, B, examples of different forms of money laundering, trace financing, sanctions violation, relevant for the types of products and services offered, C, internal policies for controlling money laundering, trace financing, and sanction violations, D, new issues that occur in the market, for example, significant regulatory action or new regulations, E, conduct and culture. Then question 99 is the above mandatory training provided to board and senior management? So is the training provided to the first line of defense, that is the front line, the customer facing employees, and the second line of defense, such as the AML department, compliance, or control functions, people who are in the control functions, and the third line of defense, which is the internal audit. Do they also receive training? That's what the question is asking. Then 99E is third parties. Do your third parties, your outsourced employees, receive specific training for activities that have been outsourced, like your AML activities? Then comes non-employed workers, your consultants or contract workers on contract. Then 100, question number 100 is, does the entity provide AML safety and sanctions training that is targeted to specific roles, responsibilities, and high-risk products, services, and activities? 101 is, does the entity provide customized training for AML safety and sanction staff? And then comes, confirm that all responses provided in the above section, training and education, are representative of all the branches of the entity, local entity. So there's a lot of requirements here, which your correspondent banking, in that while doing their CDD on you, will be asking, and therefore you can take a cue from this and incorporate these in the training programs. Next. Now, how to make AML training effective? So some techniques are like AML training, which creates a culture where learning is fun and enjoyable and engages the trainers interactively. They are more, beneficial. They're more effective. And using technology to deliver training, having user interfaces, like online training, like the ones you have currently after post-pandemic situation, all trainings are happening, online. So, and if you make it in these e-learning modules, they can be very helpful, especially for, specific like entry-level training or on specific subjects. Then creating small discussion groups of trainers on app and other apps, so that they can interact, they can ask questions from each other, they can debate things and gain better conceptual understanding. That is a very good tool. Of course, the training, the format is very important. Providing visual information such as presentations of processes, procedures, laundering schemes, and trace methods will keep the trainees, attention and retention of information. information more, they will be more attracted to that. So using visual information is very, very helpful and effective. And since AML training is mandatory, so the mindset is that, if you try to somehow have everyone complete the training, I think that mindset needs to change if you want to make it more effective by making the trainees believe that the training is of benefit to them and it will make their jobs easier and more productive. Making AML training relevant to the actual issues and pain points that your particular institution is experiencing is also of great value to your trainees. I think I've come to the end of my session. And if you have any questions, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much, Sarwar. Our next speaker is Kevin Gomez. Kevin, can you activate your audio and video? Great. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you.
And until Kevin shares his slides and gets ready for his presentation, let me say a few words about him. Kevin is currently the head of KYC AML compliance of IDFC First Bank Limited, India. He's also the designated principal officer or MLRO of the bank. His experience spans more than 25 years of banking and law enforcement, having worked for the Government of India, MNCs and private sector banks, and it envelopes the AML, KYC, CFT and fraud risk management domains. He is a certified fraud examiner, a postgraduate in public administration, and also holds a certificate in AML from the Indian Institute of Banking and Finance. He has been awarded 2 national awards for being placed first in the Railway Protection Force and the National Cadet Corps, besides others. Kevin, may I invite you to deliver your presentation?
Thank you very much, Arpita. Very good morning and afternoon or very early morning to certain of the people across the geographies where you are joining in from. So we hope you have a good time. And today's topic is about prioritizing the AML CFT training. So my intention is to continue from where Mr. Chowdhury had left. While he had provided a gamut of information as far as the from a holistic viewpoint, I would want to dwell and to delve into what exactly we can expect from institutions as far as prioritizing these AML trainings. Okay, so we'll go to the agenda which we have here. So taking on exactly the coup from where we stopped, okay, it is an important aspect for us to realize that there are rules and regulations which have been enacted in various jurisdictions across the globe in order for us to be able to combat this threat which we are having to the money laundering, terrorist financing world. So it is important for each and every institution because that responsibility has been put on each and every institution to be able to prevent or mitigate this money laundering threat. As we understood that a lack of such kind of AML training or an inadequacy in such AML trainings automatically call for enforcement actions. And these failures result in the monetary penalties. And there is a reputational risk also to institutions. So this is something which we all need to be able to realize, and as proponents of this, we need to be able to ensure that this culture is catalyzed by the way in which we progress. So if I look at the first part of what I have documented over here is about the typologies or the studies which are done by the FATF or the national risk assessments which are done by countries. They are indicating that there are criminal organizations and terrorist groups who, while trying to exploit what are the kind of vulnerabilities and the weaknesses which we have in our system for their own illegal gains. So we need to be able to improve our knowledge, and we have to be able to ensure that this is contributing to a better implementation of our controls. Important for us to be able to realize is that we need to meet these regulatory expectations, because there is a need for us to be able to demonstrate that all our staff are adequately trained. And when we talk about staff, we are talking about the 3 levels of defense, which I'll come to you later, and to be able to ensure that the people who are at the lower rung are the actual gatekeepers who can prevent the banks and the financial institutions from being misused by these fraudulent and criminal elements. For that, there is a need for us to understand what are the standards which have been set globally and how we can help and how they help actually contribute to combating money laundering and terrorist financing. Now, there are other learning platforms which are readily available, and I want to congratulate even Fintelekt on their being able to start off something on a similar line. But there is a need for us to be able to have these learning platforms to feature webinar recordings and other kind of courses. So it's going to be able to help demonstrate that people have grown over a period of time in their understanding about AML and terrorist financing. Okay. The next thing which I want to be able to talk about is the 3 levels of defense. Here it is very clear that you have the first level, which is your business units. We need to ensure that these the people or the feet on street who are actually meeting the customers, they are in a position to understand what are the red flags, what are the things which they need to be able to identify and know that there is some KYC issue, or there is some kind of know your customer issue, or if there is some money laundering or terrorist financing, some type of indicator. So these people need to be able to, because they are at the gate, they're the gatekeeper. The first level is the most important. What is the ones which are the kind of people who are able to scale through that or to go through? They are the ones who have to be caught by the next level, which is your the second level of defense, which is the compliance or the fraud teams who are in a position to be able to identify what is from monitoring those kind of transactions, from understanding what are the risk profiles, to be able to identify those kind of customers or those type of elements in that entire this chain, or this entire cycle of a customer cycle. We must be in a position to determine and to be able to detect them and to be able to weed them from the system as well, and to report these adequately to the regulators. Another aspect is the third level. Now the third level is your auditors, all those who are actually going to evaluate what are the fringe risks which are there, which have been missed out by the business and the compliance or the fraud teams. That needs to be identified by the auditors. And those people need to be adequately trained as well, such that they are having the knowledge to be able to detect the issues and where there are regulatory concerns. Now, to be able to have this top-down approach, there is a need for us to have a culture which is built into the system, where the organizations are able to acknowledge and recognize the need. And therefore, the board members, the executive directors, they are the people who also need to be trained on this money laundering and terrorist financing risk. And what are the risks which is applicable, and the reputation risk which is there to the business. Besides these, there are the other consultants or the contractors as well, or some third parties, or in-house team members whom we employ to be able to do certain other activities. So those people also, if they are trained adequately, they will be able to contribute to identifying such kind of risk which is there in the organization. Now we'll go to certain things which I want to be able to demonstrate as a institution. What are the things which we need to do? What are the types of trainings which we need to actually undertake, so that we'll be able to identify such kind of vulnerabilities or methods and trends, techniques, red flags, or case studies which we'll be able to sanitize and present to people who require these kind of trainings. So you have certain things which are the online, in-house, external, on the job, some type of communication information which needs to be shared, and induction trainings which are there, which are required for people across the organization to be trained on. Now, we understand that during this entire period of the pandemic, this kind of face-to-face interactions have been stalled to a great extent, and then this need for us to be able to get into an online virtual kind of a setup is gaining prominence ever. Now, for that, there are things which we need to be able to create, content which we need to be able to provide, such that there are e-learnings and online training courses which the organizations and people will be able to make use of in terms of updating their knowledge levels and to be acquainted with the kind of risks which are prevalent in the kind of business scenarios which we exist in as of today. There are best practices which are papers or which are written on that from different bodies, which are relevant and for people like us who are advocates of anti-money laundering and the likes. It is important for us to be able to understand what are the best practices which are prevalent across the different jurisdictions, and what are the kind of guidances which we can get in terms of being able to employ the best practices in our institution and organization. Secondly, there is on the in-house. In-house is similar to what we are in a position to have, where we have distinguished speakers and people who are well informed and knowledgeable and experienced, who can come to the location and be able to provide that kind of training in a similar environment as it happens in an external environment, where you have conferences and seminars which are being held, so that people will be able to meet, ideate, and with people from the industry, and also to be able to learn and exchange ideas as well during those kind of events. Another part of this training is to be able to learn it on the job. Now, this on the job training is something which helps most of the team members to be able to understand what they actually do on a day-to-day basis, and it is specific to certain roles where we understand that there is a lot of risk, and especially in a compliance or a fraud or a financial crime prevention kind of a mechanism. It is important that people learn on the job as well. And going to information which is a communication methodology which needs to be employed by all institutions. It is highly recommended that we use such kind of techniques in order to ensure that because there is a bit of an issue in people's attention span these days. So it is important for us to be able to provide these kind of small snippets and bulletins, some kind of newsletters which is happening, to be able to recapitulate what exactly is happening in the global environment and also in domestically as well, so that that kind of knowledge is passed over to and is updated to all our employees on the board. And another important aspect is that at time of induction, today we have certain institutes, while we are recruiting people itself to have training, and if we are able to incorporate some kind of trainings which are specific to before the person can come into our organization, it will be good for us to be able to have those kind of courses, such that people are trained, and even before they take on new roles, they are adequately trained on the job. I thought that as a banker, I must be in a position to provide to all of you what kind of challenges that people normally face when it comes to having an effective training mechanism, or kind of a proper calendarized training device for all the employees of the bank or financial institution. So one major problem which I've been observing is about these kind of churn and attrition, which is basically at the lower levels. So what we understand is that that people tend to move jobs. So when they keep moving, you have a new set of people, and most likely it is that people who are going to come directly, who are freshers, who haven't had a prior experience, they come into the system. And it is very, very important for us to ensure that that leg, which is the first level of defense, as I had explained earlier, it is very important for us to be able to identify that these are the important stakeholders who need to be trained, and they definitely need to understand what are the things which they need to implement or to be able to flag off to the appropriate levels. Okay, so this is a very, very important challenge which is there, which most of us actually face. And there is a need for us to be able to get our team members, the people who are the gatekeepers, aware that there is a mechanism for them to be able to report suspicion. There is a mechanism for them to be able to present some kind of a way in which they understand that, if they are going to tip off the customer, that can become that's actually a criminal offense. So there are kind of things which necessarily are required for those type of people on the ground, so that they will be able to distinguish what are the kind of indicators which are there to identify a suspicious transaction. In the sense, are they able to identify kind of account indicators, transaction indicators, general indicators? These are stuff which need to go to the lowest level, so that they are able to identify from these coups what exactly is something, and at least they have to be able to have a red flag that something is incorrect, and it needs to be looked at by somebody who's much more senior, or who's knowledgeable in that particular area. It's important for also for organizations to and for the teams like Fintelekt and the other players in the market, for them to be able to create these kind of levels or badges which can be provided to these kind of institutions, to the individuals in the institution, so that when people are coming, we can provide a kind of focused training to people based on the skill levels which they have attained, whether they are basic or they are advanced, or whether they are grandmasters or masters. So depending on whatever is the kind of levels which they have acquired, we will be able to take on that training to the next level by being able to have the at least know that these people are knowing more than what the basic requirements are. And probably we can look at focusing our attention and upgrading that information to whatever is the current updates which are prevalent and relevant to a specific jurisdiction. Another aspect of challenge is about the differing audiences which we tend to actually get. Now, there is a need for all organizations to be able to focus our attention and training people depending on what level they are. So we need to be able to acknowledge that a person who's handling compliance on a day-to-day basis may not require the same basic level training as a front-ender would require. So it is important that we focus our attentions on different groups of people, like as I mentioned, compliance, audit, customer service, operations. We need to be able to identify what are the training needs. And based on those training needs, we have to be able to create material which is going to be applicable to them. So much so that they would be in a position to identify red flags in their areas of expertise and flag it off to the reporting authorities, so that they will be able to do the due diligence and take necessary action as deemed fit. So besides this, there is a requirement for people to have calendarized trainings and training manuals. This I find is missing in many of the organizations, because these kind of calendarized trainings is what, when you prepare in the beginning of the year, and if you're having a dedicated way in which you are able to apply yourself, you can ensure that your organization is able to have trained resources at all levels of the gates which they are maintaining. So it is very, very important for us to be able to have a training calendar and ensure that we have training manuals and standard operating procedures, so that there are guidances to everyone on to how we need to be able to take trainings and move ahead. Another important aspect is about record keeping. record keeping is something which is normally missing, because when there is a audit, there will be somebody who will ask, provide this data from this period to that period. And if you have not been diligent enough to have that on record, we will find ourselves wanting at that point in time. So importantly, it is for us as organizations to ensure that there is a systemized attendance available. We are able to maintain what are the scores and what are the kind of levels of training which for each and every employee. We need to be able to understand what is his level, what is completed, what is pending, what is his awareness level, what are the levels of the trainers who are training. So all those things with feedbacks, it is important that there is a record which is being maintained, so that we can be able to demonstrate that to auditors and to the regulators when they come to to audit or to be able to supervise the activities, and to be able to demonstrate the culture which we have as far as training is required. Importantly, as I mentioned, is about the attention span. See, we during the time of this online, because this is this particular period has helped us all to get to a realization that people are unable to provide attention for too very long. So it is very important for us to be able to demonstrate that we have the attention of individuals, and therefore we should not have these long sessions. We should be able to have very concise and quality material which is getting circulated. We should use infographics more, videos to be able to demonstrate, or doodles, which is getting more prevalent these days. These are the kind of stuff which we need to be able to look at. And there are various other latest kind of technologies which are being employed, which we can probably look at, the virtual reality and stuff like that, to be able to create such kind of training mechanism, which is going to be really fun and loving, and fun loving rather, and to be able to ensure that people are able to appreciate and get things in their mind. Final and important aspect which I want to cover is about the cost and the culture, which is again challenged in many organizations. You find that people do not really relate to what is the kind of requirement which we have on hand, because when you talk about trainings, and if people need to attend trainings, or if you have to be able to get certain kind of tools to be able to do it, there is always a cost associated with such kind of trainings. And these kind of costs can be a little bit burdensome on organizations, and until and unless the board or the senior management is not well aware about the kind of risk and the kind of enforcement actions that are there, they will not be prompted or encouraged to be able to take care of that type of a culture of trainings. So it is important for people at the helm to be able to drive this as a requirement for the not only for the organization, but for your country and for the global community as a whole. Another part of reducing a cost is to be able to ensure that you have people whom you identify, who can be trainers, who can train a set of people. So if you have a set of, if you have good trainer whom you can train, who can probably go out and train a bigger set of individuals within the organization, so that they will be able to aptly train the remaining team members in the organization. There has to be a method which is there, which is applied, so that we will be able to reduce the costs which is there, and to also acknowledge that there is a need for us to be able to delve into more trainings and more knowledge sharing. And this is a very important aspect which we have to be able to take forward, and it's actually inadequate as far as the challenges are placed before us. So thank you very much. And I wanted to say one line of the last quote: learning should never stop. We should always continue to learn and update ourselves. Thank you very much. Any questions? I'd like to take it now, or as you determine fit, Arpita. Thank you.
Evan, thank you. I think we'll take questions towards the end. Yeah. Thank you again for that insightful presentation. Our next speaker is Shirish Pathak, Managing Director of Fintelekt. He needs no introduction, at least on a Fintelekt webinar. But let me still tell you a little bit about him. He's the founder and managing director of Fintelekt Advisory Services. Over the years, he has actively invested time and resources in building sustainable relationships with regulators and compliance professionals around the region by ensuring that Fintelekt releases relevant and timely products and services that provide significant value, to the compliance community. So over to you, Shirish, for your presentation.
Thanks, Arpita, and wonderful to meet all the participants online again for the first time this year. Thanks also to the Asian Bankers Association for partnering with Fintelekt at this webinar, which is actually the first in the 2021 series. So participants, Sarwar and Kevin have very comprehensively covered training imperatives, and I believe that would have actually given each of you a good overview of what should be done. I have chosen a slightly different angle to the topic rather than focusing only on the training aspect, and I hope it provides a slightly different perspective. So to set the context for prioritizing AML CFT training, let us first take a step back and consider some of these points. The first one being compliance ecosystem maturity. Now, all of us know that each financial subsector has evolved at a different pace with respect to AML CFT compliance. So, for example, the large multinational banks and large national private sector banks have already leapfrogged in terms of compliance evolution. And this seems to be the case with most systemically important institutions. But you have certain types of institutions, such as smaller public sector banks or cooperative or community banks, the non-banking financial institutions, insurers, mutual funds, and brokers who have arguably not kept pace with implementing robust AML CFT standards in many countries. And then we also have the DNFPBs, that is the designated non-finance business and profession sector, which has come under the umbrella seriously only recently, and that too in certain countries. So if you look at it from a macro big picture perspective, there has definitely been an upswing over the last couple of decades. But if you look at the real status on the ground, one can still see plenty of vulnerabilities. And I dare say each country is only as strong as its weakest bank or institution. Speaking about some recent trends, when one looks at training requirements with context to AML CFT, at a global level, what most regulators and reporting entities are now speaking about is the drive to effectiveness as against technical compliance. And this has influenced some of the approaches that countries and institutions are adopting. The move to a risk-based approach is definitely being spoken about a lot, and I think Sarwar also mentioned that. We also see regulators in many countries in Asia clamping down on reporting entities and mandating enterprise-wide AML CFT risk assessments. In the recent past, as many countries try to weed out corruption, we have also seen a higher focus on tightening of beneficial ownership norms. Now, there is definitely a high level of scrutiny on trade transactions, and we are also witnessing a rise in public-private partnerships, more coordination and cooperation between various stakeholders such as the police, customs, income tax, enforcement departments, and the financial services industry. Fintelekt also has carried out a number of training and awareness sessions on this subject jointly with Global Financial Integrity, which are available in our archives for those of you who missed them. If you look at the fight against trafficking, whether it is human trafficking, wildlife, or organ trafficking, uh, this is intensifying. And while the problem is still huge, there now seems to be more cognizance within the financial sector to figure out ways to identify transactions and parties involved in this. There is tremendous work being done in this area by organizations like the Mekong Club, Liberty Shared, the Remedy Project, and the Wildlife Conservation Society. And I would urge each of you to look at the resources that they provide, both for training as well as tools to help sort out some of your issues in the bank. At a tactical level, more recently, there has been an increased trend of moving to non-face-to-face KYC, due diligence, and risk profiling because of the pandemic, as well as measures on countering cyber fraud and the use of cryptocurrency for money laundering and proliferation finance. On the regulatory side, quality of reporting is seeing a tremendous focus, and financial intelligence units are laying a significant emphasis on this, especially as they themselves come under pressure from the government and law enforcement units, and in some cases, they themselves are being audited for effectiveness. We are also seeing an elevated focus by regulators on the business conducts of banks, essentially more emphasis on ensuring that the tone from the top is actually helping to build a better compliance culture. The other thing I wanted to speak about is dealing with uncertainty. We all know that the world is going through tremendous changes right now. And I don't think anybody really knows how this is going to pan out in terms of translating to stakeholder expectations, risk management, or operations, either in the medium or long term. Compliance professionals need to continuously develop their ability to deal with uncertainty and at the same time acknowledge and accept that their own role is changing. I would compare it to how the role of the CFO, that is the Chief Financial Officer or the Chief Risk Officer, evolved over time over the last 30 years and became more strategic as opposed to operational. And I've tried to depict a bit of that on the image which you see on the slide. So you see the compliance role is also becoming more strategic as banks and financial institutions realize that they need to conduct business in a more sustainable and compliant manner. Earlier in most banks, we would find the compliance department actually physically banished to a remote corner within the bank premises, but things have changed now. So as compliance professionals, you need to, over the next few years, figure out how you can become more and more valuable to the bank in terms of being true advisors internally and not just be perceived as a tool for submitting regulatory reports. The other thing is competitive analysis on how other banks are managing compliance effectively, collaboration with other fellow compliance officers in the industry, and developing a keen understanding of business risk. I think these are critical in keeping your edge as a compliance officer. Seeing the bigger picture from an ecosystem point of view. So regulators expect not just reports and data, but actual intelligence and analysis nowadays. Compliance professionals therefore need to take a look at the bigger picture and understand and implement controls and measures, not just across various functions and departments within the bank or institution, but factoring a deep understanding of risks across the entire supply chain of third parties that the bank associates with, whether it's customers, correspondent banks, or even your investment and sources of capital. I would say that in many leading banks, this is already happening, but in majority of institutions, we see this as something missing. That is the ability to look at the big picture. Why this is important is that now collaboration across the ecosystem is being recognized as a way to more effectively fight financial crime in a collective manner. And this is something that compliance folks need to understand and tune their minds and actions towards a more collaborative and collective approach. Over the last 2 decades of AML CFT focus, which really started with 9/11, we have seen the evolution of the AML CFT regime moving from transactions to patterns, from detection to prediction, from working in silos to collaboration, and now from technical compliance to effectiveness. But what we have to recognize that the challenge today is not the absence of standards. We also have standards for training. The challenge today is the robust and thoughtful implementation of standards, and the need of the hour really is collaborative action amongst all stakeholders. It could be the government, regulators, supervisors, judiciary, intelligence agencies, private sector, but all have to act in true partnership against a common enemy, individually as well as through partnerships. We have to remember that global standards exist and so do implementation guidelines by local regulators, including on training. But we have to remember that FIUs or supervisors also follow a risk-based approach themselves in terms of implementing policies or supervisory control. And criminals who understand this will always try and use a relatively undersupervised entity or an undersupervised sector to carry out their unlawful activities. That's human nature. So if you work at an undersupervised or undertrained institution and are happy with that, think again. Your institution is probably already a target for money launderers and criminals, and you are therefore at significant risk already. So now is the time that you implement robust AML CFT measures, including training. So there are some four points I wanted you to sort of think about and remember in terms of what expectations are there from compliance officers. The first I would say is do not wait until the regulator slaps a penalty on your institution to implement a strong and demonstrable training program across all levels. Both Sarwar and Kevin spoke about the importance of having training across various levels in the institution. I also believe it's very important. But remember that a reactively implemented training program, it does not bode well for your institution's reputation with the regulator. In a number of institutions, the business side will often look for loopholes to compliance practices. As a compliance person, it is part of your job to sensitize the business regarding the risks of taking shortcuts, maybe, and to protect the institution. And this is also why you need to have a grasp on the business side and know how the banking business works and not just focus on compliance in a silo. Encourage the business to follow compliance in the right spirit and not merely as a tick mark item. Now, when it comes to training, you need to factor in the latest industry trends. Some of the things I spoke about, plus a lot of information which is available in public domain. There are new typologies, new case studies that need to go into the training program. It's not a very easy task, but it needs to be done. Now, there are a number of resources you have for this. If you look at some of the latest FATF reports, you will find a lot of material that can be referred to and used. Also, organizations like the Egmont Group, UNODC, Interpol, they all have publicly available resources and videos that may be used. Some of them have partnered with us, and therefore at Fintelekt, we have just launched the Fintelekt Academy, which some of you know about, where we have more than 100 training videos available across various subjects within AML CFT, and most of them are free to view. My colleague Arpita will speak about this after my presentation is done, but I would urge you all to take a look at Fintelekt Academy as well as a resource to provide effective training to your staff. Finally, we also have to remember that although one-time certifications are important, they are not the only answer. Remember that most large global banks have been penalized despite having dozens and sometimes hundreds of certified compliance professionals in their compliance teams and within the bank. Continuous, practical, peer-generated, and role-specific learning, I believe, is key to minimizing your risks. With that, I thank you for listening to me patiently and for your time. I'm happy to answer questions later. For now, let me hand it back to Arpita, who I said will take you through our exciting new platform. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Shirish. And while we wait for some more questions to come from the audience, as Shirish mentioned, let me quickly take you through our new learning platform. And allow me to switch off my video so that you can see the entire screen. So Fintelekt.Academy, that's our new learning platform, replete with video-based training content on a range of topics within AML and CFT. On the homepage, as you can see, there are conveniently located buttons where you can sign up free and log in. Once you register, you can browse through the entire collection of video-based courses that are available. More than 80% of this content is free to view, and it can be accessed by creating the free registration. Let's look at now some of the courses that are available. There's roughly around 100 videos that are already up on the site, and we will be releasing new videos every week. You can choose from various subcategories. For example, let me take you through this category, regulatory reporting and expectations. You can click on the image on that course to access that particular course. You can look at all the information and click on the video to start watching and start learning. It's as simple as that. Similarly, you can browse through various other categories that are available. There's also a premium membership that we are offering at a very affordable price of USD 125 for the entire year. The premium membership allows you access to videos that are marked as premium over here, for which you can then take an assessment and download a participation certificate. You will find all the details related to pricing on this pricing page here. All of our courses have been produced by global professionals, ex-regulators, and industry experts. And you can see a long list of these contributors on the trainers page. Here we go. We also have several partner organizations, which include the ABA, as well as RUSI, GFI, Global Financial Integrity, Liberty Shared, Mekong Club, Wildlife Conservation Society, and others. So just in closing, the recording of today's webinar along with the slides that were shared, will also be available on this new learning platform. You will be able to log in and with a free registration and access the recording. And if you upgrade to a premium membership, which as I mentioned is a one-time payment of USD 125 for the year, you will be able to answer a small assessment based on this webinar and earn a certificate of participation, not just for this webinar, but it will allow you to do that for all forthcoming Fintelekt ABA webinars that will take place in 2021. We are also offering a discount on the membership price for ABA member banks, and that discount coupon will be shared by ABA and its member banks to its member banks in due course. So I hope I've been able to provide a quick overview to all of you. Please visit fintelekt.academy and explore more for yourself. Thank you so much again to Shirish, Kevin, and Sarwar. And also in closing, let me thank the entire team at ABA for their support, continuing support on this webinar series. Let me reiterate that the recording and slides for today's webinar will be available on fintelekt.academy, and I will urge you all to create your free registration right away. Happy learning, and that's it from us here at Fintelekt. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.